Welcome to our program on Kardec Radio.
Hello, dear friends, and welcome to our weekly program on Kardec Radio. We're discussing the miracle section of the book Genesis by Allan Kardec, and we're delighted to be here, welcoming everyone who is listening to this program. And we thank Kardec Radio, the mentors, both incarnated as well as discarnated, for this beautiful platform that allows us to meet internationally and exchange spiritist ideas, discuss concepts, and feel the teachings so that we may be helped in our inner transformation, drawing closer to God every single day. So thank you, God. Thank you, Jesus. Thank you, Allan Kardec. And thank you, all the beautiful mentors, as I said, both incarnated as well as discarnated. And I welcome all the listeners. Let me see whether I can see anyone. I see two friends. Feel free to post your names and or questions, comments, additions. So today we will be turning to chapter 14 in Genesis. And that chapter is entitled The Fluids. So the last few weeks we talked about do miracles really exist? And what are actually miracles? And we learned that miracles are phenomena that fall into the extraordinary, into the non-explainable category. And as science grew more and more in its scope, less and less miracles in the material realm existed. But consequently, miracles were pushed more into the immaterial, into the spiritual realm, and became part and parcel of religions. And to the degree that actually the Christian religion claims its foundation to have miracles, which of course Allan Kardec kind of refutes, because he says that is not a very stable basis, because miracles can be explained even in the spiritual realm. And there comes Spiritism helping us understand that all what was coined a miracle can actually be explained. And the fluids are one vital ingredient in the explanation. And this is what we will be dedicating today's gathering to. So I'm going to share the screen because we're going to pull up a little PowerPoint helping us along to make the teachings visually more interesting. You don't just see me, and you can take images of the slides. Let me see whether it's coming through correctly on Facebook, at least. Let me see here.
And
yes, good, excellent. So you guys can see me. So let us see. Let's put it into slide mode. All right. So here we go. So just to recap one more time, it is through the laws of nature that is also called natural law, and they can also be called the divine law or divine laws. So laws of nature, natural law, and divine law are just different terms for the same God's laws, that God manifests divine power. So God manifests its divine power through the laws, through its laws. And so that is important. That's an important piece for us to remember, because we also talked about the fact that we were wondering, does God perform miracles? And the answer was no, because God doesn't have to perform miracles. God doesn't have to prove her itself, because God is already perfect. And the divine laws, God's laws, the laws of nature, natural laws, are consequently equally perfect. So God does not have a need to perform miracles. So what is the definition of miracles? The definition is, according to Allan Kardec, the derogation of the law of nature. So anything that derogates of the law of nature is considered a miracle. Of course, thanks to Spiritism, less and less falls into that category because everything can be explained now. So now let us turn to page 281 in the book Genesis, again, chapter 14, entitled The Fluids. We are at item 1, and item 1 is nature and properties of the fluids, the nature and the properties of the fluids, and we're starting off with the fluidic elements. Science has provided the key to the miracles that result most particularly from the material element, either by explaining them away or by demonstrating their impossibility by means of the laws that govern matter. So in other words, science explains miracles. Then they are not, the minute we can explain something, it falls under the law of nature. It's not a miracle anymore. So science explains miracles that were resulting from the material element, anything to do with matter, the material element or the material principle. Both terms Allan Kardec uses in his book. So science can explain that. But science was not, up until now, capable of explaining the so-called miracles of coming from the spiritual, that are related with the spiritual element. And when we look at the scope of science, that science explains the so-called miracles that are resulting or linked to the material element, that only speaks to us, in us humans, to the physical body, our physical shell. Now, science can explain the so-called miracles, which then are not miracles anymore. But when it comes to the spiritual element, we know that natural science has no answer to the phenomena, the spiritual phenomena. So let us continue. However, the phenomena in which the spiritual element, here it is, plays a preponderant part cannot be explained solely by means of the laws of nature, and are thus outside the investigations of science. So Spiritism comes along and explains the miracles that are resulting from the spiritual element or the spiritual principle, same term, via the laws that are governing the spirit. So one of the arguments that very logical, intelligent Allan Kardec made last week was, if the spirit is natural, and we know the spirit, our spirit, the spirit is natural, it falls under the natural, under God's laws, under natural laws, under the laws of nature, then the phenomena, the spirit phenomena, have to be natural as well. I mean, it's only logic, right? If the cause is natural, then the effect needs to be natural. So consequently, Spiritism came along and brought and defined, created new laws. So this is why, so in other words, science cannot explain the spiritual phenomena. This is why they possess more than the others the apparent characteristics of the extraordinary. Consequently, what is he saying? He's referring, this is why they, meaning the phenomena that are linked to the spiritual principle. So the phenomena that are linked to the spiritual phenomena are more than the phenomena that are linked to the material principle, were more considered extraordinary. They fall more into the characteristic of extraordinary because science couldn't explain it. The natural science can only deal with material principles. Hence, it is within the laws that govern the spirit life that the key to the miracles of the category may be found. So it is within the laws that govern the spirit life, because there's laws there too, that the key to the explanation of miracles lie, and the miracles that are related to the spiritual principle. Number 2. Now we're going to talk about, it's still within the same chapter, entitled The Fluidic Elements. Now we're talking about the universal cosmic fluid. And this is item 2. As has already been demonstrated, the universal cosmic fluid is the primitive elementary matter whose modifications and transformations comprise the innumerable variety of bodies found in nature. So first of all, he is saying that the universal cosmic fluid, which for sakes of ease, we are abbreviating with UCF, so we don't have to write it out every single time. So the universal cosmic fluid, or UCF, is the primitive elementary matter. So the universal cosmic fluid expresses itself, so to speak, as the primitive elementary matter. And the modification of these primitive elementary matters comprise the innumerable variety of bodies found in nature. So in other words, the universal cosmic fluid comes in many different forms and shapes. And it expresses, the universal cosmic fluid expresses itself through these modifications and transformations that exist in innumerable varieties of bodies in nature. As the universal elementary principle, it offers 2 distinct states. So as you can see in the first line, we said that the universal cosmic fluid is the primitive elementary matter. Now, if we go to line 2, it says the universal cosmic fluid is the universal elementary principle. So we can see it is the same word. He's essentially describing the same thing with different words. And he's saying that the UCF is the universal elementary principle because it is also the primitive elementary matter. The bottom line is the universal cosmic fluid is the bottom line for all the different manifestations. Everything comes out of, is a form of the universal cosmic fluid. That's really what he's essentially saying. As the universal elementary principle, it offers 2 distinct states. Now let us go to the next slide. There is 2 distinct states of the universal cosmic fluid, or universal cosmic element. There's 2 different states. What are they? On the one side, there is the etherization or imponderability. You see that here in the slide on the left side, which may be considered the normal primitive state. So the first state of the universal cosmic fluid is the etherization or imponderability. Imponderability means it cannot be measured. So the universal cosmic fluid in the etherized state cannot be measured. Not for us anyway, for us humans, because our senses are too limited. Our means are too coarse, too dense. And this state, the etherization or imponderability of the universal cosmic fluid, may be considered the normal primitive state. So that might be the normal, it appears to be the normal state of the universal cosmic fluid. Because remember, the universal cosmic fluid has many different densities, many different materializations, forms. And the second form on the right, you can see it, is the materialization or ponderability, which is in a certain way only consecutive to the former. So the second state of the universal cosmic fluid is the materialization. That's when it becomes denser matter. Or it's also the ponderability. Now it can be measured. But Alan Kardec adds to it that this materialized form of the universal cosmic fluid is consecutive to the etherized universal cosmic fluid, or imponderable cosmic fluid. So the materialized version comes out of the etherized version. So I hope that's clear. Let me look whether you guys making any comments, because right now I can't see any. Let me pull this up, because I know this is pretty dense and it can get really complicated, but please feel free.
And you can take images of the...
I'm sorry. So let's see. Yeah, on my end, it doesn't look like anyone has asked a question. So I'm trusting that for the moment. Okay, let us continue. The intermediary point between the etherization and materialization, the intermediate point, the middle point, is the transformation of the fluid into tangible matter. Because it's a gradation, right? It's from like totally imponderable, the finest form of the universal cosmic fluid, and then there's many stages in where it turns into matter. That's what he's talking about. The intermediary point is the transformation of the fluid into tangible matter. However, even then, there is not a brusque transition, because our imponderable fluids may be regarded as a halfway phase between the two states. So, in other words, it's a slow shift. There is no black or white. There's no brusque, no abrupt transition. So if you would like to read a little bit more about this subject from a little bit of a different angle, please go to chapter 4, items 10 and following of Genesis. Chapter 4, items 10 and after. We're not going to go back now and study that. So you're invited, and we looked it over and we read it. So there is nothing that we need to immediately add to the subject that we're studying right now. However, it actually opens our scope and explains a little bit more. So you're invited to go back and read that and study that. So let us continue. Each of these two states, the etherization and the materialization, gives rise to special phenomena. To the latter, namely the materialization, belong those of the visible world, and to the former, namely the etherization, those of the invisible world. So you see that here in the graph, right? On the left is the etherization, and that belongs to the invisible world. The materialization of the universal cosmic fluids belongs to the visible world because it's a lot more dense. Some called material phenomena are within the jurisdiction of science per se. The others qualified as spirit or psychic phenomena because they are most especially connected with the existence of spirits, and they fall within the attributions of spiritism. So on the left, you see this, it's called the normal primitive state, or etherization or imponderability, belongs to the invisible world and falls under the phenomena of the spirit phenomena, are linked to the spirit phenomena or the psychic phenomena, and that falls into the domain of spiritism. Science can't deal with that. And on the right side of the graph, you see that the materialization or ponderability is consecutive to the etherization or imponderability, belongs to the visible world, and is linked to the material phenomena, and they fall into the realm of the science as we know it. Nonetheless, since the spirit life and the corporeal life are constantly in contact with each other, right? Because we're spirit, and our spirit acts on matter, our physical body, so it's constantly in contact. The phenomena of these two orders, namely the etherization and materialization, often appear simultaneously. While in the incarnate state, people can perceive only the psychic phenomena that are linked to the corporeal life. Those of the exclusive domain of the spirit life are outside the physical senses and can be perceived only in the spirit sense, in the spirit state. So the psychic phenomena for us can only be realized in our corporeal life. And we've experienced them. However, the psychic phenomena that belong to the discarnates, we can't perceive. We just don't have the faculties. Maybe there is a few humans who can, but most likely not. So that is very important for us. We cannot really dip into that at this very moment. In the state of etherization, so let us continue here. In the state of etherization, the cosmic fluid is not uniform. So go back to the former one on the left. We have two states of the universal cosmic fluid in its state of etherization, which is the most imponderable, the finest form of the universal cosmic fluid. The universal cosmic fluid in that etherization state is not uniform. It undergoes modifications highly varied in kind and perhaps more numerous than in the state of tangible matter. So in its form, the universal cosmic fluid in the state of etherization is not uniform and much more highly varied than in the state of tangible matter. These modifications comprise the different fluids. So these modifications that we underlined here, these highly varied modifications in the state of etherization of the universal cosmic fluid are the different fluids. So here we finally arrived at the fluids, which is really the subject of this chapter. So let us pause for a moment and take a breath. So what are fluids really? Fluids are part of the universal cosmic fluid in its etherized state. That's really what it is. Fluids are derived from the universal cosmic fluid in its etherized state. That is the fluid. So, and there is different modifications of this etherized state, but it's all fluids in different modifications. All right, because there's tons of fluids, tons, and we're not, when we say fluids, let us not picture water as a fluid. It's much finer than that. It's not even visible to our eyes mostly. So let's say again, these modifications comprise the different fluids, which even though proceeding from the same principle, namely the universal cosmic fluid, are endowed with special properties and give rise to the particular phenomena of the invisible world. So he's saying that all the different fluids have different properties. And they are linked to the various different phenomena of the invisible world, of the spirit world. So fluids play a huge role in the spirit world. Since everything is relative, these fluids have, for spirits who are fluidic themselves, an appearance as material, as that of the tangible objects for incarnates, and are to them what the substances of the terrestrial world are to us. So in the spirit world, the fluids appear to the spirits like dense matter to us. Because we also have to remember that spirits are surrounded or have a perisphere, and that is a fluidic body derived from the universal cosmic fluid as well. And spirits among themselves can see each other. Not always. It depends also, of course, on the level of inner transformation, on the level of evolution. The higher level spirits, they can see everything and they can come down to the lower zones, as we know from the André Louise series. The reverse isn't possible. but generally speaking, spirits can see each other. So it is true that these fluids for spirits who are fluidic themselves appear as matter. And it appears matter as much as matter appears to us tangible. They prepare and combine them to produce certain effects. They, the spirits, combine these fluids to produce certain effects, just as incarnates do with their materials, although by means of different processes. So fluids are for spirits what matter is for us. So this is very important. And these modifications, these fluids, these varied modifications, which are the varied fluids derived from the universal cosmic fluid, have special properties. And consequently, they cause different phenomena in the invisible world. There, as in the world, however, only the most enlightened spirits are able to comprehend the role performed by the constitutive elements of their world. So only the most evolved spirits understand fluids in their deeper expression and nature. The unlearned spirits of the invisible world are as incapable of explaining these phenomena they witness, in which they often mechanically take part, as the unlearned of the earth are of explaining the effects of light or electricity, or of explaining how it is that they can see and hear. So just like us, we can't always explain why and how we can see and hear, and we can't always explain how electricity really works as an incarnate. The same happens in the spirit world with discarnate spirits. Depending on their level of education and depending on their level of consciousness, they may, like us, mechanically live with electricity, but can't explain it. They live mechanically with and around and in as a fluidic body, and they can't explain it. That only belongs to the higher spirits. Just like here. I mean, we know that it's just a revolving door. We're right here, spirits embody in a dense physical shell, in blood and flesh. We shed that, we go through a door, so to speak, and we're in the spirit world. But we don't really, we're not vastly different. We're not different. It's just we walk through a door, and boom, we're the same types, with same spirit, with the same knowledge, same inner transformation. So it makes sense that the same happens in the spirit world in terms of knowledge and consciousness. So now we're proceeding to item 4. The fluidic elements of the spirit world are outside the scope of our analytical instruments. We know, because we can't really, the fluidic elements, we can't perceive them. And consequently, our analytical instruments, which are so coarse compared to the different fluids, we can't really, they're outside of our scope. And the perception of our, so they're outside of our scope and the perception of our senses, which have been made for tangible matter and not ethereal matter. Our eyes, our noses, our mouths, our minds, they can't perceive it. They're made for density, so it's outside of our scope and outside of our physical senses. There are those that belong to an environment that is so different from our own that we cannot imagine them, except by comparisons that are as imperfect as those by which a person blind from birth would try to get an idea about the theory of colors. So Alan Kardec is essentially explaining to us how impossible it is for us to really picture, imagine fluids, to really understand the various different fluidic forms, creations. Why? Because we don't have the instruments to measure and perceive them. And he draws a comparison to a blind person who was born blind and could not imagine what it would mean to see colors. Makes sense, right? Nonetheless, among such fluids, there are some that are intimately connected with corporeal life. So some fluids are intimately connected to us and which belong in a certain manner to the earthly environment. So there's some fluids that are more related to us. Even though they cannot be perceived directly, their effects can be observed, just like the effects of the fluid of a magnet, which has never been seen. So the fluids of a magnet have never been seen, but whose nature may be understood with certain precision. Still, right? We know, if we're scientifically inclined, how a magnet works. Such study is essential because it is the key to a multitude of phenomena that cannot be explained solely by the laws of matter. So some fluids are more related to us. He doesn't go into them really per se at this point, but he draws a parallel to the fluids of a magnet that we know that magnetism has been, to a certain degree, explained. I understand it's been vastly misunderstood also by science, but we know something about it. So that will be potentially an example of a fluid that's more related to our corporeal world. So now we're going to item 5. The starting point for the universal cosmic fluid is its degree of absolute purity, about which nothing can give us an idea. So the starting point of the universal cosmic fluid is absolute purity. Absolute purity. And again, we can't really imagine what that means, right? About which nothing can be. The opposite point, opposite of the absolute purity, is its transformation into tangible matter. So the opposite, and we'll put some dots there, it's a process, is there's many states of fluids in between, is the manifestation of the universal cosmic fluid through matter, tangible matter, which is the least pure form of the universal cosmic fluid. Between these two extremes, between absolute purity and matter, are innumerable transformations that approximate one extreme or the other to varying degrees. So there's tons of different innumerable transformations between the absolute purity of the universal cosmic fluid and matter as the universal cosmic fluid, because matter is an expression. Dense matter, physical matter, this is an expression of the universal cosmic fluid as well. The fluids closely to materiality, and consequently the least pure, comprise what may be called the spiritual atmosphere of the earth. So the spiritual atmosphere of the earth is also not pure, it's also least pure. And it is linked, it's closest to materiality. So we can't really see the Earth's atmosphere, even though I think there might be some cameras by NASA, I'm not very knowledgeable in that field, that can perceive Earth's atmosphere. But that is a fluid comprised of the universal cosmic fluid that is very closely related to matter. And it's not pure at all. So let us go back. It is within, so the spiritual atmosphere of the earth is within this environment. It is within this environment, also comprised of various degrees of purity, that the incarnate and discarnate spirits of the earth absorb the elements needed for the economy of their existence. So within Earth's spiritual atmosphere of the earth are many different degrees of purity. Within that sphere, some areas are more pure than others. But it is that atmosphere from which discarnates and incarnate spirits absorb the elements needed for the economy of their existence. So we absorb the elements from the spiritual atmosphere of the earth that we need for our lives. And that is for us incarnates as well as for the discarnates. Interesting, huh? So it kind of serves the universal cosmic fluid in its expression as the spiritual atmosphere of the earth, kind of serves to nourish us. As subtle and intangible as these fluids may be to us, they are nevertheless of a rather coarse nature when compared to the ethereal fluids of the higher spheres. And we can imagine that. So the spiritual atmosphere of the earth is rather impure and coarse compared to the ethereal fluids of the higher worlds, because we are more coarse and less pure. The same occurs on the surface of all worlds, except for the differences in their constitution and the conditions of vitality proper to each one. So the fluids take on different purities depending on what world they surround. The less material the life on these planets is, the less affinity the spiritual fluids have with matter per se. Of course, the less material the different planets are, the less material the fluids are that surround them. Okay? The characterization. Let us look at the slide for a moment. So I think we're moving on to the next one. Yes. Okay. Now we're going to this one. The characterization spiritual fluids is not strictly precise. So to characterize the characterization of spiritual fluids is not strictly precise, because in reality, they are still, in fact, matter that is quintessentialized to varying degrees. So spiritual fluids are quintessentialized matter. They are a particular form of matter. They are the most perfect example of matter. The spiritual fluid is the most perfect example of matter. So the characterization of spiritual fluids is not strictly precise, because in reality, they are still in fact matter that is quintessentialized to varying degrees. There is nothing truly spiritual except the soul or the intelligent principle. So the spiritual fluids are not spiritual, since only the soul or the intelligent principle of the universe, because that is the definition of soul in Alan Kardec's Spirits book, are strictly spiritual, is strictly spiritual. So he's giving us a more finer, a more detailed description of spiritual fluids. The spiritual fluids are thus designated as such for comparison because of their special affinity with spirits. One could say that they comprise the matter of the spirit world, which is why they are called spiritual fluids. So spiritual fluids, as we said before, play a very large role in the spirit world. Consequently, spiritual fluids, according to Alan Kardec, can be comprised as matter of the spirit world. Not visible to us, because it's way less dense than what we are living in. Nevertheless, for spirits, it is like matter for us. The spiritual fluids are like matter for us. Besides, who knows the innermost composition of tangible matter? Besides, who knows the innermost composition of tangible matter? Perhaps it is compact only in relation to our senses. I don't know. This may be demonstrated by the ease with which spiritual fluids and spirits pass right through it. Spirits pass right through the fluid. No, wrong. He's talking about tangible matter. Spirits and fluids pass right through tangible matter. So that is why, who knows, he's saying, what the innermost composition of tangible matter actually is, because spirits can move right through it. Interesting concept. Maybe this only the tangible matter is perhaps only compact in relation to our senses. So when I'm touching this pen, maybe we're only perceiving it as hard and tangible, but a spirit can go right through it. The fluids can go right through it. So Alan Kardec is wondering, perhaps it isn't really dense as we think. Several times, many years ago, had psychic surgery by Filipino psychic surgeon. And I observed him, my own body, how he went into my belly with his hands, whoop, right through the skin and took out stuff. I saw it. He showed me. I felt it. I saw his hands in my belly and it didn't hurt one bit. So this sounds like a miracle, right? Well, I'd say, yeah, that's a miracle. Why? Because we can't explain it. But we learned earlier that all of this can be explained, and the fluids are part and parcel of this explanation. So I'm sure with the knowledge that we're now gaining from Genesis, from Allan Kardec, from this chapter of miracles, we will be better able to understand why certain people have the ability to actually go right through this as if it was a bowl of water, because that's what it was. This man went through my physical, the skin, and everything that seems dense as if it was water. Fascinating. All right. Having as its primitive element the ethereal cosmic fluid, tangible matter should be able to return to the state of etherization upon disaggregation, just as the diamond, the hardest substance known, can be volatilized into intangible gas. So, tangible matter has as its primitive element the ethereal cosmic fluid. So, in other words, tangible matter is comprised of the ethereal cosmic fluid in its primitive element. It's just a different aggregation. It's a different density of this universal cosmic fluid. And consequently, Allan Kardec says, matter should be able to be returned to the state of etherization. Remember, we had the two states of the universal cosmic fluid. One was etherization or imponderability, and the other one is materialization and ponderability. So something ponderable, he's saying, should be able to return to the state of imponderability or etherization upon its disaggregation, just like a diamond, which is the hardest substance known, can be volatilized into intangible gas. So he says, once something is dense matter, it should be able to go back to its original state of the universal cosmic fluid, which is the etherization state of the universal cosmic fluid, which we learned is the most pure state of the universal cosmic fluid. He then says, the solidification of matter, so the matter that becomes solid, is in reality only a transitory state of the universal cosmic fluid, which can return to its primitive state when the conditions needed for cohesion cease. So the solidification of matter, dense matter, the process of solidification of the universal cosmic fluid is in reality only a transitory state, he says. So this pen is in reality only a transitory state of the universal cosmic fluid, and it can return to its primitive state, namely the etherization of the universal cosmic fluid when the conditions needed for cohesion, mainly sticking together of particles, cease. So when the conditions are not there anymore, that the particles stick together to form this pen, then it should be going back. It will be going back to the original state of the universal cosmic fluid. Isn't it absolutely fascinating? Who knows whether in the state of tangibility, matter is not susceptible to acquiring a sort of etherization that endows it with particular properties. Who knows, right? Certain phenomena that seem to be authentic would then tend to support such an idea. For now, however, we only possess the indicators of the invisible world. Helps us to understand, right? The future undoubtedly holds for us the knowledge of new laws that will enable us to understand what is still a mystery. So there are still some things that are mysterious. We don't know everything yet. Remember when we go to the Spirit's book, how many times did Alan Kardec ask, can you explain this? Can you explain that? And the spirits come back to him. Not yet, you guys. Yeah, you're not ready for this yet. So chill out. That'll come later. And Alan Kardec saying that too. New laws will be formed. And we will understand it better. For now, Alan Kardec's passion is telling us that the solidification of matter is really only a transitory state. Because at some point, when the conditions that are needed for the elements to stick together, it should or will or would go back to its original state of the universal cosmic fluid, which is the etherized state of the universal cosmic fluid. So, dear friends, this was a lot. We covered the fluidic elements, the spiritual fluid as a most important element for the spirit world. We covered that the universal cosmic fluid consists of two states, namely the etherized and the materialized state. The etherized state belongs to the invisible world, to the spirit world, to the psychic phenomena. Under that fall the spirit fluids. And then the universal cosmic fluid also expresses itself in the materialized state, which follows really, which is a consequence of the etherized state, and that we have in the visible world, and it deals with the material phenomena that science covered. However, the two states, there is no hard and fast line. There is a slow progress from one to the other. And let's see what we did before. We talked that the miracles are a derogation of the law of nature, and that science explains everything that's linked to the material element. Consequently, there is no or not many miracles left in the material elemental sector of the universe, because science covered that pretty much. However, the phenomena that fall into the spiritual, that are related to the spiritual element, they had a lot of miracles because they couldn't be explained for the longest time. And thanks to Spiritism, with new laws coming along, and as we're studying here, understanding the universal cosmic fluid in its many expressions, learning about the spiritual fluids and their importance, help us to undo the mystery of miracles. So, dear friends, let us get out of this PowerPoint, and here we'll come back and let us see. I want to say hello to the friends who joined and see whether there's any questions. There's Flavia. Hello, dear friend. Thank you for joining. There's Nora Brazil. Thank you so much for being here, Nora. Tony, thank you so much for being here. There is Teresa. Hello, dear friends. Loving the rainbows. There's Sheila Resende. Hello. Thank you for joining. Victoria Baker. Thanks for joining as well. There's Kiki Ferrison. Hello, dear friend. Thanks for being here. All clear by now. Oh, good. And then Robbie makes sense. And he says, imponderable and ponderable states are taken from a human point of reference. Of course. Yes. Yeah. You're absolutely right. And then Kardec Radio says, no wonder the saying we're all in God instead of God is in us. All this fluid that surrounds us, essentially, that we are comprised of. Exactly. Isn't it fascinating? There's actually, now that, I don't know who mentioned it, but there is in the chapter, in Genesis, right? Providence, divine providence on page 67, where Allan Kardec draws a comparison between divine providence and the universal cosmic fluid. He says, let us imagine a fluid subtle enough to penetrate all objects. That's exactly what Kardec Radio was saying. No wonder the same, we're all in God instead of God is in us. Let us imagine a fluid subtle enough to penetrate all objects. Being unintelligent, this fluid acts mechanically by material forces alone. However, if we imagine this fluid endowed with intelligence, endowed with perception and sensitivity, it no longer acts blindly, but with discernment, will, and freedom. It no longer acts blindly, but with discernment, with will, and with freedom, this fluid. It sees, understands, and feels. It's divine providence, but it's also the cosmic, universal cosmic fluid, because it's called also God's plasma, divine plasma. André Louise in Evolution in Two Worlds calls the universal cosmic fluid divine plasma. And here, Allan Kardec, and if you want to read it, it's the chapter entitled God, and under God, there's a chapter entitled Providence in Genesis on page 67, where he draws this analysis of calling divine providence a fluid, the universal cosmic fluid. So it's absolutely, it all fits together. Thank you for mentioning that. I'm so excited about this. So dear friends, let us do a closing prayer. Thank you so much all for joining us. And if you have any more questions, please feel free to post them. We will answer them after this program. So we invite you to close your eyes. Let us say hello and thank you, dear God, for being around us, in us, for creating us, for being part of us, for looking out for us, for seeing everything, for helping us, for being merciful and just, for being perfect and the ultimate in intelligence, and for being immutable, for us to be leaning on you, to be guided by you. And thank you so much for sending Jesus our way, who serves as our human guide and model, helping us so much in our incarnation to perfect ourselves, to know who to look up to know who to emulate. We are immensely grateful for this, for Jesus in our lives. And equally, we're expressing our deep felt gratitude to Allan Kardec for his diligent work, being so consistent, being so clear and logical in explaining the spiritual phenomena, the spiritual element of the universe, helping us to understand the laws that lie behind all the phenomena that are linked to the spirit world that science hasn't been able to explain so far. Thank you for helping us understand the universal cosmic fluid in all its manifestations, and also helping us understand the spiritual fluids and their importance in our lives, but even more so in the spirit life. Thank you for Kardec Radio, for allowing us to get together. Thank you for all the friends, both incarnate and discarnated, joining us, and the mentors on all levels supporting us in this blessed work, nourishing our souls always. And with gratitude, we're closing our program for today. And so be it. Thank you, dear friends. So does that one more question. So does that mean we can meditate or pray that this universal cosmic fluid can bring peace and healing? Of course, always, right? We can visualize and pray and express peace and healing always. And it was 2 weeks ago when we talked about the role of mediums, that mediums are not performing miracles because it can be explained. It is a form of magnetism. So healing happens and can be explained, and it's not a miracle. And we can be beacons of light and love and healing through our thoughts and feelings. As we think and feel, we emit, and as we emit, we attract. So let us turn the mirror of our hearts and minds to connect with God. And we know what happens when we turn our mirrors onto something, we reflect it back. And yes, absolutely, we can pray and meditate, turning our mirrors up to God, it back into our realm, into the world, because we're always sharing what we're receiving. Thank you, dear friends. Much love. Goodbye.